Welcome back, folks. Once again, my name is David Mazyck, and this afternoon I will be going over the National Drug Code, or the NDC Reservation tool within CEDA Direct. Thank you so much for participating once again this year. Our staff looks forward to disseminating information and sharing with you some of the tricks of the trade per se in CEDA Direct, and as it relates to drug registration and listing. So let's get started. So as a brief overview, we'll briefly discuss who should reserve an NDC, when that NDC should be reserved, and then some of the benefits of an NDC reservation, some of the pros and cons, and then how to reserve an NDC using CEDA Direct. So, who should reserve an NDC, or who should use this National Drug Code reservation tool? First and foremost, companies or stakeholders that are participating in pre-launch activities, and they want the NDC on the pre-printed labels of a particular product. Secondly, we refer to contract manufacturers or CMOs that are responsible for the PLD's drug listing. And so oftentimes the CMOs do not have the complete inventory of that private label distributor, the complete inventory of NDCs that have already been assigned. So the reservation actually helps these firms reference a NDC number that has not already been used by that PLD. And then finally, for entities that do not know the final characteristics maybe of an oral dosage form, a tablet or capsule, they do not know the final color or some of the marketing status, they're unsure of the final approval of the formulation, and back to the imprint, they may not know the specific characteristics. So this will give them a tool and a way of reserving an NDC for a particular product without having to be linked completely to that NDC going forward. Now let's look at when the NDC reservation should be used. Obviously, when it appears, the NDC appears on the labeling prior to the final approval of the printed labeling. This is a great tool to use so that the end user or the stakeholder will know what NDCs are available to that CMO or that PLD. And then finally, a great point is to distinguish between the NDC reservation and a full-blown drug listing. The NDC reservation has limited fields. We keep it to a minimum to help facilitate reservation, but it does not take the place, nor is it required prior to the listing submission. And then finally, the NDC reservation is solely for products that are intended to be placed into commercial distribution within 2 years. Now let's go over some of the goodies, some of the benefits of using the NDC reservation. Obviously, we talked about pre-launch activities, the pre-approval of a particular drug product. This will come in handy when you're printing labels. You can go ahead and place that reserve NDC, and without having any heartburn as to whether or not that product code has been used for another product. It helps alleviate that issue. And then it reserves that NDC for 2 years, so you can sleep at night because that NDC will not be used for another product for 2 years. And then once, as I mentioned to you before, it prevents the duplication and formatting issues that you may come into when submitting for a specific labeler code. Please keep in mind we've always run into configuration issues with stakeholders. Once a configuration has been set under a specific labeler code, then all the products under that particular labeler code need to be in that same config. The two main configurations that we're using now are 541 and 532. And my colleague, Puii Hubert, will go through some of that formally in a later presentation. And then finally, CMOs can reserve an NDC using the PLD's labeler code. And so this comes into play when obviously there are CMOs responsible for submitting this information on behalf of the PLD. As I mentioned, the labeler code, everything that we're doing now is totally electronic. Back in the olden days, for lack of better terms, during the paper submission, labeler codes were issued via paper, but everything that's sent to the agency in regards to registration and listing is electronic now, as you all are formally aware of. And so any labeler code that is used for this process, as well as for listing, has to be reconciled or validated within the system. So it has to be a labeler code that has been validated electronically in our system. Then now I'll go through some of just the handful of elements that are required, data elements for NDC reservation. Once again, the labeler code and labeler code DUNS, the NDC prod code, and that prod code is just the labeler code along with the product code for that particular drug. Then the name of the drug, the dosage form, marketing status, the reserved until date, and then one active ingredient. Those are the data elements that are required for the NDC reservation. Moving forward, let's go over some of the tips regarding the reservation. Now, obviously, under a specific labeler code, a firm may have multiple products that they want to reserve. They may have multiple NDCs that they want to reserve under one labeler code. So you can submit it under one file. The same NDC reservation SBL file can hold multiple reservations or multiple products. It's synonymous to the establishment registration file, wherein you can submit obviously multiple sites for a specific firm. Once accepted, the proposed NDC or NDCs are reserved. Once that system has, you've gotten that green light, they are reserved. And keep in mind, the reserve NDC stops at the product level. It does not go down to the package code, nor the package code information is not referenced in this NDC reservation file. And the limited data elements help to keep down any confusion and eliminate some of the future error messages or possible error messages. And some additional tips that we'll go over. So the marketing status, which I'll show specifically in the file later on, of all reserved NDCs is either new or reserved. Those are the only statuses that will be reflected in that marketing status page in the initial submission of a particular product. To convert an NDC reservation to a full-blown listing, the marketing status must be switched from reserved to active. And so that change opens up the rest of the listing data elements. And my colleague Troy Q, will go over the specific characteristics required for a complete listing record or listing SBL to be submitted. The reserved NDC is no longer, when it's no longer needed or no longer in use, then that marketing status has to be changed by the stakeholder to cancel. And simply by going to that marketing status and changing it from reserved to cancel, that reserve NDC is no longer valid at that time once that change in the marketing status has taken place. Now, canceling NDC is effective on the date of the submission. So you send it in, 10/10/2020. It's effective 10/10/2020, the date of that submission. Obviously, a reserved NDC cannot be used for another reservation and or for a listed product, for listing a future product. It's solely for the product that it was intended to reserve for, and so that's a feature that we want to maintain to keep down, again, configuration problems and problems with the listing multiple products listed under one NDC. So some key factors or key facts. NDC reservation is not a full-blown listing. As you can see, there are limited data elements that are required for NDC reservation versus a completed listing. The data is not published, and because it's not a proper listing. So you will not see this information on DailyMed, nor will you see it on the National Drug Code. Keep in mind, those two systems are for products typically that are in commercial distribution and are active, viable products in the marketplace. This is something that's reserved prior to. Again, the effective date is the submission date. They coincide. And finally, from that reserved NDC is set aside solely for 2 years. So you have to use that NDC in that two-year time frame, or it's set aside during that 2-year time frame. Beyond that, from the effective date 2 years out, is then removed. Now, looking specifically at CEDA Direct, this just gives you within the platform how the reference page is referenced, the product listing and reporting page. It shows the draft status, shows you your document label, product details, the user, the date, set ID, and root ID. The next page actually gets into some of your details, your header details, your labeler details, the product and establishment. But specifically, there are red dots that show you things that are required fields, and some of these fields are generated automatically. Set ID and root ID, obviously, the version number can be changed, and then the effective date of the submission that you're sending in, and document type. Below is the product information. On the next slide, it gets specifically into the product data element, and here's where you'll first see the NDC that you're reserving or attempting to reserve. So you would take that labeler code that corresponds to the labeler DUNS, fill that in, then dash, and then put in the product number. And then also the drug non-proprietary name and the dosage form. Again, the red dots, the red stars denote the required information on these pages. At the very end will be the ingredients. And then again, the information about that one active ingredient. Keep in mind, only one active ingredient is required for the submission. Now, let's move on to our challenge questions. First challenge question is: the NDC reservation is required to facilitate the listing submission, and that's false. Keep in mind there are two separate files. The reservation is solely for pre-launch activities, and obviously a complete listing is to recognize or to denote the listing of a product that is currently being marketed and is in the marketplace. Second question: the reservation date may be up to 2 years after the effective date, and that's true. It's up to 2 days from that effective date. After that time frame, that NDC reservation is no longer valid. And then finally, the reservation data is published on the NDC directory. and that is false. The NDC reservation is not a complete listing, therefore it is not found on the NDC Directory or DailyMed. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to pass the baton to Troy Q, who will talk further about the formal drug listing process. If you have any further questions in regards to the NDC reservation, please feel free to contact our staff at the email address located on your screen. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Now that you have your label code and complete your established registration and NDC reservation, next, let's get the product listed. So to give you guys an overview, I will be talking about who needs to list, when you have to do it, and I'm going to show you how to submit a drug listing, and I'm going to talk about how to update your current listing and delisting, and then give you a quick summary, and I'm going to provide you with some helpful tips on the do and don'ts, and then some helpful resources. So product listing, who have to do it? Unless exempt, all the registrants must list all the drugs manufactured from commercial distribution. In other words, if you are required to register, you are required to list also. There's a few exceptions to that. If you are a contract manufacturer, including pack, repack, and sterilize, you must list under your own labeler code. Regarding a contract manufacturer who manufactures for private label distributors must also list for the PLD using the PLD labeler code. Now, the PLD may elect to list their own product if they want to, but they are doing so as authorized agent for the contract manufacturer. So when does it need to happen? Initially, listing information must be submitted within 3 days of initial registration. Any update have to be done every June and December. If something changed to your product today, you have until the end of December to get an update. But we do encourage you to make an update as soon as possible. With regarding annual listing certification, I just want to let you know that an update to your SBL will certify your listing for the next calendar year. So if you are making an update to your SBL, you don't need to recertify using a blank no change. That Puii will talk more about it later. It will certify the next calendar year. So any update this year, it will certify your listing until the end of December 2021. Now I'm going to show you how to submit drug listing using CEDA Direct. If you don't already have an account, you can request one. It takes less than 10 minutes. The link is under the quick links on the right hand side. You also might want to check out the resources site. They have a lot of very useful documents. One of the documents that I find very useful is the active ingredient, active moiety relationship. In this document, it will show you what moiety to use and ingredient type if you're not sure. Also, the tutorials, it have the CEDA Direct webinar slide from last year and a quick user guide as well, and FAQs. So once you have your account set up and log in, on your left hand side there should be a submission type and a management account. If you don't have all the form under submission type, it is probably because you have not given yourself access to that form. To give access to the form, click on the Edit User Profile, then scroll to the bottom of the page and you will see the section named Form Access. Place the check mark next to the option and click Submit. Now you should see the option on the CEDA Direct home screen. To list your product, click on Product Listing and Certification. Next, click on Create New and Upload File. If you have an SBL file, you can select the Import an Existing Product Listing or Certification SBL. But since I don't, I'm going to select Create New Product Listing or Certification using a blank form. Then the SPL document type that you want to submit. To do that, click on the drop-down menu of the SBL document type. For this demo, I'm going to select Human OTC Drug Label. Notice soon I select Human OTC Drug Label, this message from the web page popped up. If you are listing for the hand sanitizer, I encourage you to use the standardized hand sanitizer templates that can be used to pre-populate this listing and customize for your products. If you choose to use the template, you will have to select which of these template type to use. So since I'm not listing for the hand sanitizer, I'm going to click cancel, which brings me to this screen. There are 5 different sections in listing. The first section is your header detail, which have set ID, root ID, version number, and the effective date. Those information is already pre-populated for you, so you don't need to do anything. Unless you want to change your effective date. Effective date is the date that you want to upload your SPL to FDA. Next, you have a label name and label done, which you have to provide. For label done, make sure it is linked to your label code that you're going to use for your listing. Then you have the resident detail, which is not a requirement field, so you can skip if you want, or you can put something in there. Next, we want to know who is manufacturing this product, so you have to provide manufacturer information. We want to know their name, DUN number, to make sure that they are currently registered with FDA. Also, if they are doing multiple business operations for this listing, you can enter like this. When you're done, click on Say Establishment. Next, add products. So first thing first, you have to provide a product NDC. So I'm just going to make up one here. And then you have to provide a proprietary name. I'm just going to use aspirin here. And for the surface, if you have one, otherwise you can leave it blank. And then the generic name, I'm going to use the same here. And the DEA, if it is a DEA schedule, so you have to select one of the options from the drop-down menu. A dosage form, I'm just going to use tablet, and the route of administration is going to use oral. For the source NDC, normally if you are the repacking of drugs or if you're doing a compounding, then you would provide the source NDC, otherwise leave it blank. Okay, and you have to provide a marketing status. There are 2 options in here. One is active and one is complete. Active is meaning you are marketing this product. Okay, complete meaning you are delisting it. All right, so I'm going to select active because I want to market this product. Then you have to provide the marketing start date, which is the day that you want to market in this product. All right. Next, you have marketing category. The marketing category is what is your authority for marketing this in the United States. Okay. Since this is an OTC product, I'm going to use a OTC monograph, not final. I'm just going to make one up. And then for the citation number, because this is an OTC product, you have to put in a citation number. If you're not sure what part number it is, I have the link at the end where you can look it up. Next section, this is where you add all the ingredients that associate with the drug you are listing. So this part might be a little confusing because usually the denominator is on the bottom, but it's the first few here. So my substance name is going to be aspirin. The strength is going to be 325 milligram. And then the denominator, I'm just going to put 1. Since it's tablets, it's going to be 1 to 1. And then for the type, if you're not sure, you might want to ask a pharmacist or a chemist on your team, or you can check the active ingredient, active moiety relationship spreadsheet that I have mentioned earlier. And then the active moiety is going to be the same. And now I'm just going to say the ingredient. So this section is a product image. This is not where the current image go. This is if you have a tablet and you want to upload of what the tablet look like. If you have one, you can upload here. Otherwise, you can leave it blank. Then you move on to characteristic. We want to know what does your drug product look or taste like. Since it's a tablet, you have to provide the color, the size, the shape, score, and the imprint. And then you are done with that section. Move on to the package section. So in this section, you would describe how the product is packed. So for example, I want it to be in the bottle and it's going to be 100 tablet. But first, I will have to provide a full 10-digit format for the packet NDC. Then I'm going to, for the packet type, I'm going to put in the bottle. Since mine is the bottle. And then for the quantity, I'm going to put 100 tablet. And then for the unit, I'm just going to put 1. For the combination product type, this is not a combination product, so I'm going to select type 0. Marketing status should be active. And the marketing start date should be today's date, but you can change the date to any date that you want. Now, let's say if you want your bottle in a box, then you will create a outermost level. Otherwise, you can just click Save, and you'll be done with the packet section. The last part is just updating the content of label and the package insert. And this will not appear until you have saved it as a draft. Unfortunately, you cannot upload a PDF and be done with it. You have to add it section by section. SBL has specific section to be entered and separated and searchable, so you have to add the section by section. Here are some of the sections that I have added for this listing. Normally, you add the sections, you just follow your packet insert or the content of labeling that you are given and just add it that way. Now, if you miss any section, you will get an error from the validation process. The system will let you know what other sections need to be added. Once you are done with the content of labeling sections, you can either submit SBL or you can save and validate. This process will check for any errors before submitting to FDA. This feature does not mean you have submitted to FDA. You must click on Submit SBL button to submit to FDA. For those who request for manual overrides, please make sure you click on Submit SBL button before sending your request with the set ID and the submission ID. If there's no error coming back, next click on Submit SBL. Now your listing is done. So I want to talk to you a little bit about updating a previous listing. If you have 1 or 2 products, you don't need to do a listing certification. You can just send in an update to the 1 or 2 listing that you have, and that will certify your product. Basically, in order to do that, click on Create a New Version of your most recently accepted submission. Do not change the set ID. The set ID stays with that listing throughout the life of that listing. The group ID will automatically generate, and also the new version number will automatically generate as well. You modify all the data that you need to. If there's any change, if there's no change, all you do is create a new version and submit. And there you have it, an update listing. If you are discontinued the product, and I want to emphasize that this is required, when you stop manufacturing the drugs and stop marketing, you have to notify FDA and let them know that you are delisting. Not certifying it and letting it expire is not the same thing as delisting it. The process of delisting is very easy, and I'm going to show you how to do it. You just create a new version of it, keep the same set ID, the group ID, and the new version number will automatically generate. You just change the status from active to complete, and the end date will show up, and you input the expiration date of the last lot in the distribution and then submit, and that is it. So quick summary, listing is important. This allows FDA to maintain an inventory of all drugs commercially distributed in the U.S. and their representative labeling. Listing data is also used by the public and other organizations in academia and industry. Remember to delist when no longer in commercial distribution. Have a standard operation procedure or system in play to verify the accuracy of listing at least twice a year. So in a nutshell, we all need this information to be accurate, complete, and up to date. Next, I'm going to give you some helpful hint do and don't for the product listing. So yes, do visit our website. I think it will benefit you because they have a lot of good relevant information there, including the requirements and what must have and complete before you can list your product. So please check it out before do your listing. When requesting for assistance, it will be helpful if you can copy and paste, not a screenshot of the set ID and a submission ID of the failed submission. There's two reasons for that. One, it will help us to locate your SBL file quicker. Two, we're not troubleshooting the wrong SBL file. When you are ready to submit your SBL, make sure that you click on the Submit SBL button. Because when you click on Save and Validate, you are actually checking for an error before submitting to FDA. We have a few firms that thought by validating SBL, they have submitted to FDA. Absolutely not. You must use the Submit SBL button to submit your SBL file to FDA. We expect you to know the product you're listing, but if you are unsure about something, please ask. We want you to submit with the correct data so it won't present a problem for you later on. So do ask questions if you're not sure. We're here to help. Yes, we have seen a lot recently where firms make mistake on the product name and try to correct it after the submission has been accepted. The problem with that is certain fields in the data elements cannot be changed, which means you either have to request for a manually override or resubmit it with a different product NDC. So take your time when working on your listing. If you make any edit to your SBL file after requesting for assistance, we won't be able to view the errors. The submission must remain in failed status for us to diagnose the issues. If you make any change to certain fields in the data elements section, you should expect to receive an error message. As I have mentioned earlier, certain fields you cannot change it, which means you either have to request for a manually override or resubmit it with a different product NDC. So make sure the data are entered correctly the first time. If you're requesting for assistance, please do not include multiple email addresses in the to field. It will only delay in responding to your email. Just send to one email address, you will get a quicker response. So below, some very helpful resources website. You can check it out. For example, the electronic drug registration and listing instruction. If you have question issue with your strain conversion, you can check out this website before contacting us. Regarding the OTC active ingredient or citation number, you can check out this website. And if you're not sure if you have to list or register your facility, check out the electronic code of federal regulation, and they have all the detail there. You know, listing can be a little challenging, especially for those that never done it before. So if you need help with your technical issue or regulation question, please don't hesitate to contact us. We're here to help. Lastly, I have two challenge questions for you. Challenge question number 1, true or false? You are required to provide established information in product listing. Please take 3 seconds to decide if you think it's true or false. If your answer is true, you are correct. You must provide established information in your product listing. Challenge question number 2, true or false? A product listing can be listed without label code. If your answer is false, you are correct. You have to have a label code for your listing. Now I'm going to hand it over to Puii, and I will take questions after Puii and Tasneem. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Puii Huber with Drug Registration and Listing. Thank you, Troy, for the informative presentation on product listing. In this presentation, we will focus on annual certification of drug product listings. In the agenda today, we will go over some background on where the annual certification of product listing requirement is coming from, who must certify and when, what must be certified, and what will happen if a product is not certified. And lastly, we will end with some challenge questions. For background, the requirement to update or certify drug listing annually was established in 2016 by the publishing of 21 CFR 207. The FDA published the final rule on August 31st of 2016. However, this did not go into effect until November 29th of 2016. 207.57 allows registrants to submit a single no changes certification SPL rather than an individual product by product submission for drug listings that have no changes to the listing information since the last update or listing submission. The legal responsibility for submitting product listing lies with the registered establishment. So certification of product listing is also the responsibility of the registered establishment. Private label distributors and contract manufacturers should communicate and work together to make sure that all the NDCs involved in their business relationships are properly certified. U.S. agents, importers, consultants, and anyone acting as an authorized agent for a registrant may submit product listing certification SPL files. It is important to note that the certification of SPL submissions is only accepted during the annual listing certification period, similar to registrant establishment between October 1st through December 1st. So outside of that window, the individual product listing SPLs must be used to update or renew a listing. So this is the blanket no changes is only available during this period. Every active product listing that has not been updated within the current calendar year must be certified that no changes have occurred in order to remain active for the following year. This includes all human drug document and product types, finished and unfinished bulk, API listings, approved and unapproved, RX, OTC, medical gases, homeopathics, any PLD and contractor listings, as well as repackaged and relabeled listings. Blanket no changes certification of product listing should only be submitted if the data on the listing SPL is fully accurate. This includes establishment information. We get this question often in DRLS inbox. For example, my firm has 2 products listed with the FDA. Should I submit a blanket no changes certification or submit a full product listing? It is up to the firm, but the best course of action, if you have just 1 or 2 products, a handful of products, you could submit a full product listing by resubmitting the previous SPL, because if you do this, you will have the chance to verify all the information you are submitting, make sure it's accurate, and this gives you a chance to give you a thorough review. However, if the blanket no changes certification is definitely helpful for firms that have many products to quickly certify. Any NDC which has not been newly submitted or updated during the calendar year or certified during the October to December listing certification period will be considered expired on January 1st of the following year. All expired listings will be inactivated and removed from publication in the NDC Directory and unfinished drug downloaded files. The only way to reinstate an expired listing is to submit an updated product listing SPL with the same set ID as the previous version, different document type, one higher version. Troy has gone through that, so that's the only way you can reinstate an expired listing. We'll get into the how to certify. So the first step would be to log into your CEDER Direct account. Once you are in, you will see a screen similar to what you see here. Once you're in, you can click on product listing and certification. Next, click on create new upload file, and that will take you to this page here, and you'll have the option to click on this radio button that says create a new product listing or certification using a blank form. And once you do that, the SPL document type gets enabled, and you can select from the drop down blanket no changes certification of product listing, and that will take you to the actual product certification form. And the first section here, the header details, you're going to leave it as it is. Since this is a single submission every year, you can use the auto-generated set ID and root ID. And the next section is authorized agent details. This is generally the same as CEDER Direct Account Owner. So if you click on that checkbox there, all the information will carry over. Next, you're going to click on the labeler, add labeler, labelers whose drug listing files you're certifying for. Once you click on that, you'll have a pop-up. You're going to enter the labeler code, and you're going to click on refresh establishments. Once you do that, it will take you to this screen. You can select the checkbox here at the bottom to select a particular establishment, or you can click on select all. Since I have just one in my example, I selected the establishment and click on select the establishment here, and you're going to click on Show Products. Oh, there's another step. I'm sorry. If there are any establishments that have not been identified here that is associated to the labeler, it could be that that establishment was marked confidential, and for those you're going to have to manually add the establishment by clicking on Add Establishment. But in this case, since I have just one establishment, I'm going to go ahead and click on Show Products, and this will result in a list of products where you can choose from. And so it takes me to the screen. So that labeler, that establishment, provided a list of product NDC, and you can see that there are different status that the NDCs can have. So in this particular example, I have 6 products, but only 2 of them are available for me to certify. As you can see here, only 2 of them, Wonder Drug A and Wonder Drug C, are the only products that I can certify. There are 8 status you can have. So I'm going to quickly go over the different status associated with an NDC. The first is certified. This product listing has been certified, and it's, you're good. You don't need to certify it if it's been certified. Uncertified is the only one that you can certify. This product has not been certified and is available for certification. Pending compliance case, this means that there is a compliance case open, and the listing data cannot be certified unless the case is closed. If you have any questions with your case, or you have a pending case, if you have any questions or issues, you can send us an email. Next, we have completed. This means that the product is discontinued and the listing data is not available for certification. Current. The listing data for this product is current because it was either submitted or revised in the current calendar year. So no certification is needed for this. And everyone's favorite, validation errors. So for this particular one, this means that the current version that was previously submitted in the product listing file does not conform to our current validation procedures. But I'm going to go in depth with the validation errors in a couple of slides. And we also have inactivated. The listing data for this product has been inactivated by FDA and cannot be certified. And then we also have expired. This also means that it is not it cannot be certified because it has expired. So to change the status of a product from expired to current, you have to submit a new version of the existing listing data. A full product listing has to be submitted for both expired and inactivated. So validation errors. If you have a validation error associated with the NDC, you can click on it. It's hyperlink. You can click on it, and it's going to tell you, you'll see a message that looks like this to let you know that you have to access the original listing SPL file and make any changes and make all the required corrections and resubmit. The rule text here, it also tells you exactly what needs to be updated in the SPL. And an individual submission, an update to the listing SPL will satisfy your annual product certification requirements. So with validation errors, once you submit the SPL, you don't need to come back in and submit a blanket no changes. Now that we've reviewed all the different types of status, we will continue with our submission. And as I mentioned earlier, I have 6 products, but only 2 of them are available for me to certify. So as you can see here, only the status that is uncertified can be certified. So for now, I will go ahead and select the 2 certifiable product NDCs, then click on Save Update. And that will take me back to the main page where I can submit the SBL. So you will click on Submit SBL, and we're done. So this brings us to a few frequently asked questions that we receive in DRLS regularly regarding annual certification of product listing. First one is, should I use the same set ID to update a blanket no changes certification? If you choose to update a blanket no changes certification with the same set ID, you must include all the NDCs from the previous version, or else they are replaced by the new version. So as I showed you earlier, the header details is already updated for you. You can just leave that as it is. You don't need to email us or ask us to provide the previous set ID for certification. You can use the system generated set IDs for submitting this type of SPL. Next, does this blanket no changes certification renew my establishment registration status? And the answer is no. The establishment registration and drug product listing certification are 2 separate renewals. The blanket no changes certification is to certify drug listings only. So more frequently asked questions such as these that I have here, these can be found in DRLS website at fda.gov/EDRLS, and under electronic drug registration and listing instructions, you can scroll to the bottom and the listing certification guide can be found here. It's in a PDF format. Now that we've gone over the process of blanket no changes certification of product listing, we will move on to some challenge questions. The first one is, blanket no changes certification SPL must be submitted in June and December to any time, as soon as there's any change, or October 1st to December 31st. And the answer is 4. Next question. If I listed or updated a product in the current calendar year, do I need to ensure that I certify that product between October 1st through December 31st? And the answer is no. Any NDC product code, if there's a new listing submission or an update was made during the calendar year, that NDC is considered up to date and does not need to be certified again during the certification period. In closing, here's a summary of what we discussed. Every active listing on file must be updated if there is any changes, or certified if there are no changes, in order to remain active for the coming year. Annual certification of product listing is only available to be submitted during the final quarter of each calendar year. Products that are not certified will be removed from publication on January 1st of the following year. We went over the different statuses earlier. Only NDCs with the status uncertified is available to be certified. Lastly, products under the marketing category of unapproved drug for use in drug shortage cannot be certified. And that brings us to the end. Thank you for keeping your drug listings up to date. Thank you.
Hello and good afternoon. Thank you, Puii, for your informative presentation on how to certify drug listings. Now we will discuss the National Drug Code Directory, also known as the NDC Directory. By the end of this presentation, you should be able to understand what is the NDC Directory and how often it is updated, what is included and what is not included, several important considerations about the NDC Directory, proprietary information in the NDC Directory, how to access and search the NDC Directory, and a few challenge questions. So what is the National Drug Code Directory? It's a publication of FDA that includes listing information submitted by companies as part of the listing requirements that are under Section 510 of the FDA&C Act. The NDC is a unique three-segment code, which is a universal product identifier of drugs. It's required as part of a drug listing. It is a unique 10-digit code with 3 segments that identify the labeler, the product, and the package size. The NDC Directory is maintained by the Drug Registration and Listing staff, and it is updated every day on weekdays. So what is included in the NDC Directory? This directory includes information on final marketed drugs submitted to FDA in the Structured Product Labeling, or the SPL format. It includes prescription and non-prescription drugs, approved and unapproved drugs, repackaged and relabeled drugs. What about unfinished drugs? As far as the unfinished drugs, you have the capability of searching for these products through the unfinished file. These are not considered part of the actual NDC directory, but you can search for them from the unfinished file. And I'll mention a little bit more about this in a few minutes. So the unfinished file, from there you can find the active pharmaceutical ingredients, or the APIs, the drugs for further processing, and bulks for human compounding. What is not included in the NDC directory? The NDC directory does not include all listed drugs. It doesn't include the animal drugs or the blood products. It does not include the drugs that are marketed solely as part of a kit or combination product, or the inner layer of a multi-level package product which is not itself marketed individually. It does not include drugs with the manufactured under contract marketing categories. These files are, however, kept in our internal database. And if anyone wants to inquire about the status of a listing for a drug that was manufactured under contract, you can email us and include the submission ID or the core ID or the NDC number. Here are some important points to remember about the NDC directory. The assignment of an NDC does not denote FDA approval. Any representation of this is misleading and is a federal violation. Just because an NDC for a product is found in the NDC directory, it does not necessarily mean that the product is defined as a drug by the FDA&C Act. And just because a product is included in the NDC directory, it does not necessarily indicate that the FDA has verified the information provided. Remember that the content of each NDC directory entry is the responsibility of the labeler who submitted the SPL file. A few more considerations. The NDC directory contains product listing data that has reached the marketing start date, and the end date for these products has not reached. Just because a product is in the NDC directory, it does not mean that it will be covered by reimbursement by CMS or other payers. An NDC cannot be assigned to a non-drug product. This is strictly prohibited. And an NDC number cannot be reused. What is an exclusion flag? There are several exclusion codes found next to the proprietary name in the search results. You may notice these when you search for a product and it has a letter next to the proprietary name. So if you see a U, it means that the records marked with U, this information was removed from publication because the record was uncertified. And if you see an E next to the proprietary name, this means that the information was removed from publication because the FDA found inaccuracy in the data submitted by the firm. This data will be released for publication once the complete and accurate information is submitted to FDA. What is proprietary information in the NDC directory? Some information is confidential, that is proprietary information, and will not be available for public view. This includes information about the manufacturing facility, for example, and also inactive ingredient data that the manufacturer has marked confidential. This will not be available to view in the directory. The NDC directory files are downloadable files. There are two files available, product file and a packages file. And there are two formats available, a spreadsheet version and a CSV format. Here is a link to the NDC directory search page. Once you access the web page, you will see a screen that looks like this. Here you will have an option to select a file. Here we want to search for a finished product in the final marketed form. So you see the arrow here is pointing to the finished product radio button. And users have an option to select from the finished product file or the unfinished product file. So here we're searching under the finished products. You see that you have a select type options, and these are either the proprietary name, application number, non-proprietary name, NDC code if you happen to already know that, and the labeler name. You have these options to select. In the second search bar, add at least 3 characters representing the option you chose in the select type above, and then click on Search. As we mentioned earlier, the NDC directory includes information for final marketed drugs, but you have an option to search for the unfinished drugs also. As you can see here, this arrow is pointing to the unfinished radio button option. So in the search page, you can select the unfinished file option, and then you can click on the drop down under the select type, and you have options of non-proprietary name, NDC code, or labeler to choose from. And then you click Search. Adding or updating entries in the NDC directory. If a labeler wants to add a new listing, or if they want to correct an old listing which had errors in it, they will have to submit a new or updated drug listing file. The accuracy of the listing data is the responsibility of the company submitting the information to FDA. And we do monitor the data accuracy and integrity through our compliance program. When we find inaccurate data and when we remove it, that is when you will find the E flag in the NDC directory, as we mentioned earlier. Okay, so we have almost reached the end. But before we can close, let's see if you can answer a few challenge questions. The challenge question number 1, is this true or false? You can search for medicated feed in the NDC directory. We'll give you a few seconds to think about this and answer. Okay, so the answer to challenge question number 1 is false. As we said, medicated feed falls under animal products, and we said this animal products are not found in the NDC directory. Okay, our second question. All of these are options for searching under the unfinished file except A, the NDC code, B, the labeler name, C, the non-proprietary name, or D, the application number. Let's give you a few seconds to think and answer this one. Okay, so the answer for challenge question number 2 is D. The application number cannot be used to search under the unfinished file, but it can be used to search under the finished file. Thank you. That brings us to the end. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, please let us know. You can always contact us at DRLS@fda.hhs.gov.
Great. Thank you, David, Troy, Puii, and Tasneem. Those were excellent presentations. And as expected, we got an enormous number of questions. So I'll repeat what I said in the last Q&A session. We want to try and get to as many as we can, and we're going to answer broadly and group several questions together. But as always, if you have a very specific situation and you don't think maybe our answers answered your question or you need more clarification, please feel free to submit your question to our eDRLS help desk, edrls at fda.hhs.gov. I want to begin. There are a lot of questions, dozens literally, revolving around the contract manufacturer versus private label distributor relationship and who has to list and what and all that. So I'm going to give you my description of it. You know, we talked about it a little in registration. We've talked about it here in the listing module. Let me try to reiterate and see if I can clarify some of these questions. So when you have a private label distributor, a company that doesn't perform any drug manufacturing functions, it does not have to register. They, in fact, contract out with a registered manufacturer. How does FDA want to see that listing data? What should be submitted? Well, in such a case, FDA expects to see 2 listing records for that product. And it may seem a little duplicative, but this is the government, you know, it happens. The law requires that the registered establishment, the contract manufacturer, submit a listing. And then the regulation also requires that for human drugs, we expect to see a listing under that PLD's labeler code and NDC as well. So how do each of these get submitted, and who does it? So the PLD submission should reflect exactly what's on the shelf, what's being commercially distributed, what's being dispensed. The marketing category should identify what type of drug this is. Is it an NDA approved, ANDA? Is it an OTC monograph? Is it an unapproved drug other or an unapproved homeopathic? The marketing category of the PLD listing should reflect the actual product on the shelf, if you will. The contract manufacturer listing should use one of only three different marketing categories. There's approved drug manufactured under contract. There's monograph drug manufactured under contract, and there's unapproved drug manufactured under contract. And that should cover all the different situations. Now, who submits those listings to us? Whose responsibility is it? Well, the law says that ultimately the responsibility and the burden is on the registered establishment. So that contract manufacturer is on the hook and must submit both listings. However, we recognize that private label distributors, big companies and small, may want to control their own destiny or at least not have to rely on someone else to fulfill their regulatory duties. They can also control their own NDC assignments. So we encourage private label distributors to submit on their own behalf. They actually act as an authorized agent for the registered manufacturer. But we encourage them to control their own data, in other words. However, ultimately, industry, you guys need to work it out with each other. Just make sure there is a clear understanding when you engage in that manufacturing contract of who is going to submit what to the FDA. And then now, in a related question, I gave the gold star to whomever asked this this question. I think this is one of the most important questions, is if you're a PLD with multiple CMOs, how do I manage that? What's the best way? Do we have any suggestions? The truth is, there's different ways and different methods and different philosophies. So it's ultimately up to you. But again, as I just said a moment ago, make sure you work it out however you want to do it. If you want to manage all your own data and submissions, you can do that. Just make sure there is a clear understanding between yourself and your contract manufacturers as to who's going to submit what. And I say that also to you contract manufacturers out there. Make sure there is a clear understanding that whether you are going to submit this data on behalf of your clients, the PLDs, or they want to do it for them, or maybe you want them to do it for you. I jokingly say, I don't care who gives me my data as long as I get it. So just, again, work it out amongst yourselves, and you'll make the FDA happy. Okay, moving on here to the questions. Rather than jump around, I'm just going to throw a few questions at each presenter in the order that they presented. So, David, I'm going to put you on the hook first. And we have a couple of good questions here. We'll start with this one. And there were a couple of versions of this, but why would a company need to reserve an NDC? And specifically, they say that since the labeler code is distinct and assigned to a specific company, how can there be a problem with other companies possibly duplicating that? So you can go over all the reasons for reserving, but why specifically maybe should a PLD reserve NDCs or the CMO?
Well, it's an excellent question, and Paul, you touched on it. In an instance where you have multiple CMOs who've assumed the responsibility for listing on behalf of a PLD, herein, when it's not managed properly, the individual firms won't know which product codes have already been used. And we're referring to the product code. We're talking about the formulation for a specific product. So obviously, yes, that labeler code is specific to that labeler or registrant, but you may have multiple products that need to be reserved and then set aside to distinguish that from, let's say, another CMO submitting for a product and assigning the same NDC. Likewise, there are also issues with formatting challenges. We talked about the two distinct configurations. By using this tool, you will eliminate the formatting error of listing a product for a specific labeler code under the wrong configuration. So from that vein, the tool can be used to eliminate those two instances.
Thank you. I would also add, and I only think of this because it actually happened recently, earlier this year, there are companies out there that are so large that the left hand may not know what the right hand is doing. And in this case, one division of a company had been planning to use a particular NDC product code within the company's labeler code and actually listed something out from underneath another division in the company that was planning to use it, and took it from somebody else, I should say, another NDC from another division. So it's not just PLDs with multiple CMOs. It's even just larger companies. If there's, it can happen if there's not good communication. You don't want to upset long-term planning. David, while I have you on, again, if you can reiterate, is one required to reserve an NDC prior to actively listing it?
That's an excellent question. The NDC is not required. NDC reservation is not required to fulfill a full-blown NDC listing file. Keep in mind, this is just a tool to reserve an NDC. And if you look back at that slide, the NDC reservation is consistent with those 5 different elements, and it's not a complete listing. And nor does it represent a product that is currently being marketed. So it is, to reiterate that point, the NDC reservation is not a prerequisite for a full-blown listing.
If a 2-year reservation expires, can you reserve it again, that same NDC? And if so, how do you renew a reservation, if you will, or how can it be extended beyond 2 years if needed?
In that particular instance, what the firm would do is just go back into that specific file for that product, and then update the marketing status. Obviously, it would be from canceled back to an active status. Keep in mind, if in the event that NDC has not been used or reserved for another product. So basically back to the marketing status, and then change that, for lack of better terms, the status back to active for that individual drug product.
Thank you. And finally, hopefully just a quick hitter, we have a question. Can we make a reservation for an API product listing?
Yes, the NDC reservation can be used for any quote-unquote drug product.
Great. Thank you, David. Troy, you're on the hook now. We'll begin with, can you review or at least summarize perhaps when we have a lot of questions revolving around this. When is a new NDC required, whether a new product NDC or a new package NDC required versus just updating a listing to change some data to make it more accurate?
Thank you, Paul. So for the new product NDC, you would assign a new one if there's a different in the product, like the active ingredient or the product name or the dosage form, those kind of things that will require a new product NDC. For the package code, you would assign a new package code if the product, assuming everything is the same, the only difference is the size, then you will assign a different package code.
Thanks. And so I want to make sure that those who asked some of the related questions got that and understand that that answer applies to their questions too. So anytime the formulation changes, the strength or the dosage form, you can't just change or list other products under that same NDC. You need to assign a new product code. And anytime a package size or a package type changes, you need to assign a new package NDC. So I'm hoping those of you who asked all those satellite questions around that subject got that and understand. Troy, there are a few questions regarding the templates that we mentioned, and some of them have used them. A couple of questions revolve around, can they change the values in the template, or can they add other ingredients, particularly active, active and inactive. Those are the only two types of ingredients. And can they modify the drug facts labeling sections and all that were in the templates?
Thank you, Paul. So yes, absolutely, you can change any of those. The reason we create that template is to save you guys a lot of time for filling in certain things that you don't need to fill in. Like, for example, the content of labeling is pretty standard for that kind of template. So that's why we create a template. But yeah, by all means, you can go and change or modify anything that you wish to the template.
I would also add, there was an earlier suggestion from a user, and thank you for that, to create a wizard to walk through a drug listing. And with the software, I just want to address that and say that's sort of what we wanted to do with these templates. If you see a value in there, then that's a value that if you're using the template to create a listing, you should look at, review, and see if it needs to be changed and modified to reflect your product. Particularly this year with the hand sanitizers, we saw a lot, and by a lot I mean to the tune of hundreds, likely over 1,000 or more products for whom the proprietary name, the name of the product, remained just hand sanitizer, which was our default value in the template. So using the template is excellent so that you have a reference of what needs to be filled out or not. But please ensure that you review all the data and change it to accurately reflect what your product is really. It actually reflects what the product really is and what people see on the market.
Paul, if I add here, as the compliance lead, I want to reiterate that the template that we have for the hand sanitizers currently on CEDA Direct is reflective of what is allowed to be manufactured and distributed under the policy, the guidance that we actually published in March. So what you put in the market under that policy should match the information that is included in that guidance. If it's not manufactured, it's not covered by any of the provisions that are included in that guidance policy or policy guidance. So you have to change the information to include accurate information about your data, but you also have to remember if you manufacture or distribute something that does not match that policy guidance, then it's not covered by that policy guidance.
Thank you, Layla, and that actually leads into another question I was going to get to later, but since you mentioned it, there was a question about someone wanting to list a hand sanitizer that they knew was different and didn't completely comply with the guidance, and they asked what marketing category to use. So even though your product may not be compliant with the guidance, it may still be compliant with the monograph. So it might be, again, depending on what you have in your product, that you can still claim OTC monograph not final and claim the appropriate monograph citation. If not that, if you know it's not compliant with the monograph, you can still list under the category of unapproved drug other. And that will fulfill your listing obligation in order to submit. I just want to, again, thanks to Layla for bringing that up. Last question for Troy here before we move on to Puii. The question here is, what do you see when, what do you do, excuse me, when you see a typographical error in the active ingredient strength of the uploaded label? Oh, but the uploaded label has the correct strength. So say there was typographical error, and we've seen it all the time. How does someone correct the strength specifically? Because there is a special process for that.
So yeah, so in my session earlier, I had mentioned that there are certain fields that you can correct, and there's certain fields that you can't correct because the validation will fail, and the strength will be one of them. So the only way you will correct that kind of issues is by obviously you have to put in the correct values, and then you will have to submit it, and then when you get rejected, which it will, and you will have to request for a manual override, because that's the only way to correct it.
And that actually, thank you for saying that. That gets into one other person's question about if you, we'll get into, there'll be another presentation in a little while specifically about manual overrides. But if you have, they take a long time to process. They're manual. They're not. It's not automated. And if you, the question was, if you request the override, say now or maybe mid to late December, and it doesn't get processed until January, until after the deadline to update or certify your listing, what happens to the status. And the status is that that product will be considered not updated or not certified by January 1st, and it will be in jeopardy of being inactivated. Now, when the override is processed, again, depending on the situation and of whether more data was needed and when exactly you submitted the request, the update may get backdated, and so you'll be okay. And I also would add that we generally don't inactivate listings due to non-certification right on January 1st, so there is a little bit of a lag time, or at least some leeway, to allow people to get those updates in. But don't wait until the last minute. I encourage everybody listening right now to start reviewing your data now and make the changes and find out if you need an override or not for corrections, because they do take a lot longer than if you can just resubmit. Thank you for that. Next up is Puii. Puii, a couple of questions for you. First of all, someone asks to reconfirm what you presented. It is up to the firm to decide whether they want to submit a blanket no change for their drug listings or simply submit updates for each of them. Is that true?
Thank you, Paul. Yes, I want to clarify that. We know that any NDC that is updated during the calendar year is certified. So what I was saying is it is up to the firm to submit either a full product listing or blanket no changes certification. If you have just a couple of products, I was suggesting that you submit a full product listing rather than submitting a blanket no changes certification of product listing.
Good. And does this blanket no changes certification also renew my establishment registration status at the same time?
That's a very good question. No, it does not. They are two separate submissions. There are two separate renewals, I should say. The blanket no changes certification is to certify your drug product listing only, and the establishment registration that Reggie went over earlier is to certify your establishment registration. So two very different certification or renewals.
Great. And last question. This company says they had a product approved in April, and they submitted their SPL in April to list it. Do they need to recertify or update it this fall, or is the product good until December 2021?
Another good question. So since the product listing was submitted in April during the current calendar year, it is considered up to date and does not need to be certified again, and it is good until December 2021.
Thank you. And finally, with Tasneem, what happens if a company has submitted the listing data, but it includes a future marketing date? How does that affect the NDC directory?
Well, that's a good question. So if a company submits the data and it includes a future start marketing date, that means the listing file will be kept in our internal database, and the data will be available for viewing only after the start marketing date has reached.
Great. And on the other side of that coin, or the other side of that coin, I guess you'd say, is what happens to the listing data when the marketing end date is reached?
Okay, so for that one, the data is removed from the directory, but it's kept in our internal database. So it stays in the directory until it reaches the end date. Then it drops off.
Excellent. Thank you. One final question. Troy, if you're there, I want to call you back on. I did skip a question accidentally for you, and I hope you can address this. A couple of questions, and one of them was even from the earlier session, is what is the difference between the set ID and the root ID, document ID, and when do you use them, and what's important about those two?
Thank you, Paul. So, as I had mentioned earlier, the set ID is the unique number that will stay with your listing throughout the life of the list, right? The root ID is every time you're making an update to your SBL file, it generates a new root ID number. So, for example, if you would make an update to your SBL file and you would like to request a manual override or have us assist you with the issues, we would need at least one of those number for us to look it up, the SBL file. But we prefer to have either the submission ID or the set ID will be better.
Great, thanks. And then if it helps anyone out there, the way I think of it is the set ID applies to the whole set of submissions over time. It's kind of like a case number or a file number. And then each submission has to be uniquely identified too. So it gets a unique root ID, also called the document ID, depending on what you're looking at. So thanks again for that, Troy. Our time is up. We are going to take our afternoon break, the early afternoon break.